Only 12 people can say they have walked on the moon and know for sure what the Earth looks like from the lunar surface. If one of these 12 people told you that extraterrestrials have visited Earth and that the government knows about it and has been covering up the truth for years, if he also told you that aliens have not only visited our planet, but they also averted a nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union to prevent humanity from destroying itself, would you judge him as a lunatic, completely out of his mind, or would you listen to further details? Oh yes, there is life all over the universe. We are by no means alone in the universe. We are certainly not alone. Certainly not in our solar system. But we have identified a number of planets which most likely could be life-bearing, and I happen to be privileged to be aware that we have been visited on this planet, and that the phenomenon of UFOs is real, even though it has been covered up by our governments for a long time. These are the words spoken by a man during a radio interview in July 2008. That man's name is Edgar Mitchell. For those unfamiliar with him, Edgar Dean Mitchell was a United States Navy officer and aviator, test pilot, aeronautical engineer, and NASA astronaut. As a lunar module pilot of Apollo 14 in 1971, he spent 9 hours on the lunar surface in the Fra Mauro Highlands region and was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Not just any Tom, Dick or Harry. Before becoming an astronaut, Mitchell earned a degree in industrial management from Carnegie Institute of Technology and joined the United States Navy in 1952. After attending Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, he served as a naval aviator. In 1961, he received his second degree in aeronautical engineering from the US Naval Postgraduate School, and 3 years later he received his doctorate in aeronautics and astronautics from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He attended the US Air Force's Aerospace Research Pilot School from 1965 to 1966, graduating first in his class. During this time, he was an instructor in advanced mathematics and navigation theory for astronaut candidates. In 1970, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by then-President Richard M. Nixon. In addition to all that we have so far listed and described regarding his extraordinary professional activity, Edgar Mitchell was one of the most important ufologists of the modern era. His thoughts and statements regarding UFOs acquire a unique and decisive value, precisely because they are statements made by a NASA astronaut and member of the United States Navy, a man who has been on the moon and had relationships with the highest US military and government officials. Therefore, it is reasonable to think that from his privileged position he had access to secret materials and information, and that he decided, with courage and generosity, to share what he knew with the rest of the world. The truth, according to Edgar Mitchell. At a conference in Connecticut, Mitchell publicly expressed his opinion that he is 90% sure that many of the thousands of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, reported since the 1940s belong to visitors from other planets. He goes on to say that while some of these phenomena have been explained in some way, either as debris of various kinds or as natural phenomena, too many remain unexplained and unexplainable. Mitchell says he has witnesses, many of them from military and intelligence agencies, who have convinced him that the US government has been covering up the truth about UFOs for 50 years. Many of these people have maximum security clearances, are sworn in, and feel they cannot speak without some form of immunity, Mitchell said. It takes a lot of courage to come out with information of this magnitude. One of the brave few was Graham Hancock, The Economist's former East Africa correspondent. He believed that NASA refused to recognize aliens due to a Cold War mentality, and fear that evidence of alien life has destabilizing political, economic, and social consequences, and that it had an official duty to hide and not disclose classified information to protect national security. His book, The Mystery of Mars, hypothesizes that life once existed on the red planet, but was wiped out by meteorite impacts, just as dinosaurs are thought to have been wiped out here on Earth 65 million years ago. What I mean is that it is a mentality, a way of thinking and acting, not a conspiracy, wrote Hancock. However, to be perfectly honest, we will always have a lingering suspicion that there may be something going on behind the scenes. Something much bigger. Hancock and Mitchell disagree on some aspects of the theory of life on Mars, but both point to the holy grail of conspiracy theories, the Roswell crash, the alleged crash of a flying saucer in New Mexico in 1947, as one of the most emblematic pieces of the government cover-up program regarding the presence of extraterrestrials on Earth. Mitchell said he knew direct witnesses who could provide the truth about relevant events, such as Roswell, and that his information campaign was gathering other believers. "There's no question that Ed Mitchell gives us credibility," said Walter Andrus, International Director of the Mutual UFO Network, the largest organization of its kind in America. But Mitchell also added that until recently he was very reluctant to appear with ufologists, widely regarded as bizarre loudmouths. Although he was a consultant on the cult television series The X-Files, Mitchell believed that the series was among the culprits of the national misinformation about aliens, flying saucers, and UFOs that comes mainly from the internet and false UFO organizations in America. "The idea that there are structures on Mars or the Moon is preposterous," Mitchell said. "I can attest to the latter. I have been there. We saw no structures at the landing site and none were reflected in my helmet," as claimed. As he watched the Earth from the Apollo 14 command module, Mitchell said he observed our home planet and felt an overwhelming sense of universal connectedness. Mitchell gave an interview on April 19, 1996, to Dateline NBC, in which he spoke of meeting high-ranking officials from 3 different countries who claimed to have had personal encounters with extraterrestrials. Mitchell said the evidence of such alien contact was very strong, and that international governments were covering up visits and the existence of bodies of alien beings in places like Roswell, New Mexico. Mitchell declined to name names, but says some of his information comes from highly classified former US government employees who say the US government has been harvesting sonic engineering secrets from UFOs. The Defense Department declined to comment on Mitchell's allegations. This man, who had mastered a world of rules, norms, and rigorous science, had experienced nothing short of a spiritual transformation, an epiphany that had befallen many of his colleagues. Alan Bean of Apollo 12 became a painter of haunted lunar seas. Apollo 15's Jim Irwin became an evangelical Christian missionary and searched for Noah's Ark. Apollo 16's Charlie Duke became a spiritual minister. His trip to the moon prompted Edgar Mitchell to try to reconcile his 2 contrasting natures, the test pilot scientist and the spiritual pilgrim. After traveling through space and reaching the moon, Mitchell began a journey to his inner self, thanks largely to a chance meeting with a shaman, a Tibetan healer. Mitchell's mother suffered from permanent blindness. Mitchell was skeptical at first, but later admitted that his morbid curiosity prompted him to try to find out if this man could actually heal his mother. He brought them together. The healer placed his hands on Mitchell's mother's head, and the next day, at 6 in the morning, the astronaut said he saw his mother come running into his room, with the Bible in one hand and her glasses in the other, yelling, "Son, I see you! I see you! I can see!" Mitchell admitted to being amazed, but he was still a man of science, so logically he invited the man to live with him for a while, so he could understand how he had done it. The astronaut who had been to the moon invited a Tibetan healer to sleep in his home. Astronauts and UFOs. Coming from a real astronaut, Mitchell's opinions are often compelling enough for audiences. The sixth man to walk on the moon has long claimed that most UFOs are alien spacecraft and that the government is hiding its relationship with alien cultures. Edgar Mitchell is a long-time proponent of psychic powers and alternate models of reality. During his Apollo flight, he even conducted private ESP tests with his friends at home, and later founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which researches telepathy and other similar subjects. But he is not the only one. Other Apollo astronauts have also seen strange things. Perhaps the best known is that of Apollo 11, when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins noted that a UFO accompanied them for most of their flight to the moon. "We saw a slow flashing light a considerable distance away from us," Armstrong said. "There was something out there, close enough to observe," Aldrin said. He went on to say that of course they couldn't and had no intention of saying, "Hey, Houston, there's something moving next to us and we don't know what it is." They didn't want to say that because they knew that those transmissions would be heard by almost every individual on Earth, and that somebody could ask them to return to Earth, precisely because of such an unknown object. A famous image was taken by the Apollo 16 crew as they left the moon and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. 4 seconds of video shows a sort of near-perfect Hollywood flying saucer, leaving a kind of plasma trail in its wake. For over 30 years, a still from this video has been touted by the UFO community as evidence of an extraterrestrial visit to planet Earth. But subsequently, a team from the Johnson Space Center's Image Science and Analysis Group decided to take it seriously and analyze it scientifically. After some time, they discovered that, when viewed from the exact spot from which the video was taken, the object of the footage exactly matched a small spotlight on a rod protruding from the side of the capsule. From that angle, the spotlight looked exactly like a flying saucer, and the rod matched the plasma trail perfectly. A couple of bolts are also visible in the video. Another highly regarded report in the UFO community comes from James McDivitt, command pilot of Gemini 4 in 1965. McDivitt says that he was flying with Ed White, and that, while he was sleeping, a strange thing happened. They were drifting through space with the control engines and all instruments switched off, when, suddenly, an object appeared at the window. It had a very precise shape. It was a white cylindrical object and had a long arm that protruded laterally. I don't know if it was a very small object up close or a very large one from a distance. Unfortunately, my colleague, Ed White, was asleep and therefore was unable to witness the vision of the object as well, says McDivitt. The man took pictures, but was hampered by the reflection of the sun on the window. There is a famous photograph available on the web and described as the tadpole, but according to McDivitt, that photo, selected by a NASA technician because he thought it was the one McDivitt was talking about, shows only the reflection of the sun on the window and is not what McDivitt saw. Interestingly, in 1968, a study called the Condon Report was published. The Condon Committee, organized under the leadership of physicist Edward Condon at the request of the US Air Force, studied UFO reports in order to determine whether anything scientifically useful could be derived from them. Within the Condon study, the McDivitt report mentioned is cited, which was classified as unidentified. Conventional opinion has always assumed that McDivitt's object was orbital debris from a Soviet or American rocket launch, or even that it was his Titan II booster. In fact, one of the objectives of Gemini 4 was to practice the orbital rendezvous with Titan II, and although this is very similar to the description made by McDivitt, McDivitt himself explains that he spent 2 hours observing the Titan II rocket, and therefore knew its appearance well. The object he saw, he insists, was not Titan II, but an object totally unknown to him. Later, on the same flight, Ed White communicated via radio. "We have an object in front of us. It doesn't flash like the Titan II booster. It appears to be the type of object McDivitt mentioned, unless I'm being a bit sun-blinded. It looks like a very bright object." McDivitt never doubted that what he saw was just an unmanned satellite or some other orbital debris. Gemini 4 wasn't the only such flight where something like this happened. 6 months later, on Gemini Flight 7, an unknown object was sighted, and, as with the McDivitt report, this report is also contained within the Condon study, and once again it is classified as unidentified. Frank Borman and Jim Lovell performed what has been called a kick maneuver to get into a position where they would make orbital rendezvous with the Titan II booster. When they did so, Borman reported the following: "A 10 o'clock obstacle. We have several. They look like debris up here. Actual sighting. We also have the booster in sight. Yes, there are very many. They look like hundreds of small particles piled up on the left, about 3 or 4 miles away." Lovell said that the booster was also in sight, travelling slowly along with the debris cloud. But the particles mentioned by Borman must have been something else, unidentifiable. And furthermore, they were going in another direction. They were travelling along a different trajectory. According to later analysis, Borman's particles were flakes of ice from fuel residues leaked from Titan II, travelling along a parallel trajectory. As is often the case with such tales, popular reenactments greatly exaggerate the event. Reports written about the sighting by the Gemini 7 crew describe it as a massive spherical object, or even that Borman and Lovell photographed twin oval-shaped UFOs with glowing undersides. These are nothing more than untruthful embellishments added by UFO writers. A fake photograph matching the latter description was even made and was widely circulated. Aliens prevented war between the USA and Russia. The sixth man to walk on the moon has made the startling claim that aliens came to Earth to avert a nuclear war between America and Russia. In fact, in 2015, Mitchell said in an interview with the Daily Mirror that extraterrestrials tried to prevent us from going to war with Russia and that they had contributed in a concrete way to keeping peace on Earth. He also said that extraterrestrials were very interested in White Sands, an atomic weapons testing ground where the world's first nuclear bomb was detonated in 1945, because they wanted to know our military capabilities. Edgar Mitchell said this was confessed to him by high-level military sources who saw the UFOs during atomic weapons tests. The military confessed to Mitchell that they had seen strange aircraft flying over the missile bases just above White Sands. The astronaut has openly declared his belief in aliens since he set foot on the moon, later becoming one of the most important figures in the global UFO community. Mitchell said he knows white sands very well. He knew perfectly well that it was an experimental field for atomic weapons, and it was precisely this that interested extraterrestrials, to study our military capacity and consequently to know how to annul it. Indeed, Mitchell continued, it was them, the ETs, who prevented the US from going to war with Russia. Mitchell also said he heard similar stories from people manning missile bases during the more tense phases of the 20th century. He says he has spoken to many Air Force officers who worked in these silos during the Cold War, and they told him that UFOs often flew overhead and managed to disable the missiles. Not only that, other officials at bases on the Pacific coast told him that their test missiles were often shot down by alien spacecraft. The Daily Mirror then decided to interview Nick Pope, a former UFO researcher at the Ministry of Defense, precisely regarding the statements made by Mitchell. Pope confirmed that he had the privilege of knowing Edgar Mitchell and called him an honest and sincere man. However, Pope revealed that, as far as he knows, the information in the astronaut's hands on this matter does not come from things that he has experienced firsthand, but from things that have been told to him by others. Pope went on to say that, for the person he is, Mitchell has many friends in government, military and intelligence at the highest levels, but as he, understandably, does not want to cite his sources, we cannot be sure that these people have been truthful with him, or have indeed been privy to insider information about UFOs. Pope added that the idea that peace-loving extraterrestrials are here to warn humanity of our destructive ways is popular among those who take a New Age view of the UFO phenomenon, likening this theory to the plot of the UFO phenomenon, among other things, classic 1951 sci-fi movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. There have certainly been some UFO sightings near nuclear facilities and military bases more generally, Nick Pope confirms, but he nevertheless says that an alternative explanation is that some of these sightings are attributable to espionage activities involving spy planes or secret drones. In short, the classic alternative explanation of enemy military espionage. Finally, Pope concludes by saying that considering that the universe is about 14 billion years old, if the planet Earth has been visited by extraterrestrial life forms, it is unlikely that it is a civilization that precedes us by a few hundred years. More likely, they are millions of years ahead of us and can do whatever they want, not just prevent the outbreak of atomic warfare or disrupt some of our weaponry. Statements that, frankly, do not have the same strength as Edgar Mitchell's revelations, and indeed appear the same whenever a US government or military official tries to hide the truth about UFOs. The astronaut Edgar Mitchell, among other things, has always enjoyed enormous esteem and recognition from the highest government, military and scientific offices for having literally saved the entire Apollo 14 mission from a certain crash while landing on the moon in 1971. He began making his UFO revelations publicly in 1973, just 2 years after the moon landing, when he abruptly left NASA, divorced his wife, and founded the Institute for Noetic Sciences. Mitchell used this institute as a platform in which to discuss the exploration of new worlds, through different and alternative ways to the traditional ones of science and religion. His firm belief was that extraterrestrial life forms had visited Earth and helped humanity to walk a more spiritual path. In fact, Mitchell began developing his alternative thinking as early as his training as an aviator, but he was neither known nor regarded as insane or one prone to making bold claims. He was regarded as one of the most skilled and brilliant pilots in the entire US Army. Even NASA would have recognized this potential, giving Mitchell the opportunity to live the dream he had had since President John F. Kennedy expressed his desire to put a man on the moon. So much so that when Kennedy announced the space program's goal to reach the moon in 1961, Mitchell was ready to go. "It was what I wanted more than anything else in the world," he declared in an interview. "Since I was little, I have dedicated every day of my life to this, to exploration, to discovery, and it was this that kept me going and pushed me to be who I am today." Mitchell spent most of his adult life in the US Navy. He was a Navy aviator before attending Navy graduate school. He later became a Navy research pilot and earned a doctorate in aeronautics and astronautics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Eventually, he attended the Air Force Pilot School to become a test pilot. While he was studying for his degree, he taught astronauts mathematics and navigation. In 1966, just 13 years after enlisting, he became a NASA astronaut. He was in the rotation for the crew of Apollo 9 and 10 and was supposed to go to space with the ill-fated Apollo 13. But it was thanks to Apollo 14 that Edgar Mitchell was finally able to set foot on the moon. As he returned to Earth, he finally had a moment to admire the view. Seeing the Earth from the outside changed the way he saw himself and humanity. In a 2016 interview with Vice, he called it a powerful panoramic effect. Looking at the Earth from space, the question arises: who are we? How did we get here? And where is all this going? It's an ancient and long-asked question that human beings have been posing for a long time. My experience has made me realize that perhaps our science is wrong in not answering these questions, and perhaps our religious beliefs are archaic and flawed. And since we ourselves have now become an extraterrestrial civilization, we have to ask ourselves these questions again and do much more work to find the answers. Wikileaks. Among the wide range of emails revealed by Wikileaks, some of them concerned the then Hillary Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. Naturally, the hottest topics and those which we focused on more carefully concerned issues more closely related to politics. However, others have to do with topics that we are more interested in: UFOs, extraterrestrials, alien energy sources, and our very own Apollo 14 member, astronaut Edgar Mitchell. Podesta had handled President Barack Obama's election campaign and, in 2015, was preparing to plan and organize the election campaign of the Democratic candidate for the 2016 elections, Hillary Clinton. Podesta's emails that revealed certain unclear facts about Clinton's speeches on Wall Street had incited the ire of the Republican political opponent, Donald Trump, who would later become the 45th President of the United States. But in January of 2015, Podesta received an email from Edgar Mitchell asking for an urgent meeting on disclosing the truth and zero-point energy, and that a colleague of his, named Terry Mansfield, would update them on the Vatican's awareness of extraterrestrials. In August of the same year, Mitchell sent another such email to Podesta, in which he basically pleaded that Clinton and the future US government not take any military action because extraterrestrials will not tolerate any form of violence on Earth. Their goal, in fact, is to bring and maintain peace throughout the universe by exclusively preaching forms of non-violent action, and, as a reward, they would have given the Earth zero-point energy, an inexhaustible source of energy. Mansfield confirmed that Mitchell was indeed the author of the two emails, even though they were sent via Mansfield's email address. She also added that Mitchell had been working with an aide to Podesta in hopes of finally setting up a meeting with him to discuss a treaty to ban guns in space. But in reality, Mitchell never met Clinton or Podesta. The meeting with Podesta, sadly, never took place. Carol Rosin, one of Mitchell's longtime collaborators, told GeekWire in an email. Rosin noted that Mitchell chose to contact Podesta not only because of his professional position, but also because the two share the same interest and beliefs about UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligent life forms. Indeed, when Podesta left the White House in February 2015, he said in a tweet that his biggest regret from the previous year was once again not ensuring the disclosure of the UFO files. I talked to Hillary about it, Podesta told KLAS-TV in March of that year during a campaign stop in Las Vegas. There are still classified files that could be declassified. Podesta did not clarify the content that could be in those files, but assured that Clinton had sworn to get to the bottom of any mystery surrounding the UFO phenomenon. Unfortunately, however, as we know, Clinton lost the election, and consequently we will never know if she would have kept her promise. Rosin said Dr. Mitchell was bravely educating people that we are not alone, that there are no ETs who come to control or harm us, but they are, rather, willing to give us 0-point energy. Furthermore, there is no evidence that there are weapons in space planted by alien life forms, and that this would instead be a perfect moment in history for world leaders, and in particular US leaders, to sign and ratify the Treaty on the Prevention of Placement of Weapons in Outer Space, which was introduced by the leaders of Russia and China. 2 other emails contained in the Wikileaks Podesta file were sent by Tom DeLonge, longtime member of rock band Blink-182. These emails refer to a UFO documentary project, possibly the Secret Machines multimedia project that DeLonge started that year. In an October 2014 email, DeLonge told Podesta that he was the one who interviewed you for that special documentary about our sensitive topic. In the other email, sent in January, DeLonge referred to Air Force Major William McCasland in connection with the 1947 Roswell UFO incident. Roswell. The US government is hiding the truth. On July the 23rd, 2008, Edgar Mitchell was interviewed by Nick Margerrison on Kerrang Radio. Mitchell claimed that the Roswell incident was real and that aliens have contacted humans several times, but that governments have covered up the truth for 60 years, stating, "It just so happens that I have had the privilege of being aware that we have been visited on this planet and that the UFO phenomenon is real." In response, a NASA spokesman said, "NASA is not involved in any kind of cover-up of alien life on this planet or anywhere else in the universe. Dr. Mitchell is a great American, but we do not share his views on this issue." In an interview with Fox News on July the 25th, 2008, Mitchell clarified that his comments did not involve NASA, but senior military and government officials who had confided in him that the Roswell crash did indeed involve alien craft. Mitchell also claims that he later received confirmation from a Pentagon intelligence officer, obviously without giving his name, to protect him from possible repercussions. Our destiny, in my opinion, and we may even begin it soon, is to join the planetary community. We must be ready to go beyond our planet and beyond our solar system to try to understand what is really going on out there. Mitchell grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, site of the famous UFO crash in 1947. Mitchell said that residents of his hometown were silenced and told not to speak about their experience to military authorities, or they would undergo terrible consequences. However, many of them didn't want to take the truth with them to their graves, and so they talked to Mitchell, having been born and raised in Roswell and who later became an astronaut, even one of the few to have been on the moon. Roswellians trusted Mitchell and told him the truth about the 1947 incident. Mitchell later claimed that he was summoned to the Pentagon to discuss precisely what the Roswellians had given him. An anonymous admiral working for the Joint Chiefs of Staff promised Mitchell that he would uncover the truth behind the Roswell story. A short time later, the admiral only managed to report to him that he had received confirmation of the fact that an extraterrestrial spacecraft actually landed in Roswell. However, when the admiral sought to find out more, he was denied all access to classified information. The admiral himself, Mitchell later declared, denied the whole affair, perhaps worried by the possible threats he had received. Mitchell concludes the interview by urging those who are doubtful to read books, study history and the most important events, so as to get their own idea and understand what is actually happening. Because there is really no doubt that we've been visited, he said. As mentioned at the beginning of our work, Edgar Mitchell returned from his trip to the moon a new person, transformed by the very essence of the trip. It's as if the vision of planet Earth as a small blue dot had awakened a consciousness that had hitherto remained dormant within him. He was now able to perceive the essence of all things and felt connected with the whole universe. Once back on Earth, Mitchell devoted himself to exploring the mind and the scientific and transcendental potential for a sustainable future. In 1972, after retiring from NASA, Dr. Mitchell founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences to facilitate research on the relationship between consciousness and cosmology. In the years that followed, he lectured and wrote about intuition, quantum physics, and the belief that an almost Darwinian principle of genetic learning and self-organization underlies all of creation. During an interview for a Canadian trade magazine, Edgar Mitchell responded to a question about the sensations a human experiences being in space, amidst planets and stars. Mitchell revealed that during the descent to Earth, he and his crew travelled on a course that was perpendicular to the axis where the Earth, Moon and Sun are located, so that every 2 minutes or so they could see the planet and the two celestial bodies from the window of the spaceship, and this had a strong emotional impact on each of the astronauts. In addition, the stars seen whilst being in space seemed to emit an at least 10 times brighter light than can be perceived from Earth, creating a breathtaking 360-degree panorama. It was during the descent, while admiring the view, that Mitchell felt a sensation that the molecules in his body and those in the spacecraft he was travelling on had been generated by a more ancient generation of stars. This was not just an intellectual thought, but a visceral experience, accompanied by a form of ecstasy, a kind of total transformational experience. That said, for a man of science and being of Baptist religion, it was difficult to combine this transformation of his with his education and training. However, the experience he had was so strong that when he returned to Earth, he began to dig through various literatures to try to understand what had happened to him. He found nothing in the scientific literature, but eventually managed to find a reference guide written in the Sanskrit of ancient India. The descriptions of Savikalpa Samadhi were exactly what he had perceived. Seeing things in their separateness, but being able to perceive them viscerally as a unity, as oneness, accompanied by a feeling of ecstasy. The materialist worldview assumes that everything is due to the coming together of small atomic structures. Spiritual consciousness, on the other hand, operates as an incident of this encounter. The opposite extreme is the idealist interpretation, which has existed since Greek times, or even earlier. According to this interpretation, consciousness is the fundamental matter, while physical matter is only an illusion, or, at least, a product of consciousness. Science and religion have lived on opposite sides of the spectrum for hundreds of years. Even Mitchell admits he had difficulty initially reconciling the two in the 21st century. Yet, body and mind, physicality and consciousness belong to the same side of reality. It is a dyad, not a dualism. After going through this transformative experience, he decided to devote the following years of his life precisely to the study and deepening of what he had just discovered, founding the Noetic Institute in order to examine spiritual and religious experiences from the perspective of quantum science. The aspects of quantum science involved in this study are entanglement, coherence, resonance, and non-locality. The most important aspect is the latter, of non-locality, especially in reference to information, that is, knowledge understood in a general sense. Knowledge is a non-local coherent structure. Subatomic matter is entangled in a single process, and subsequently the various parts separate. Non-locality predicts that the individual parts, the various separated particles, nevertheless remain related to each other at the quantum level. This means that if something happens to one particle, the other responds instantaneously, even if it's on the other side of the universe. This is non-locality. So the discovery of a new piece of information on our planet causes a response in a particle found on a planet thousands of light years away from ours, if this were once part of one process. Mitchell says he learned from mystical literature that nature has a history that can be learned through the Akashic record, an etheric field in which all events that have occurred in the past since the beginning of time are recorded. The transmission of such information can take place precisely because of the non-locality of particles. This is the explanation for why we are able to pick up information at a distance. Virtually every psychic or intuitive event is related to this phenomenon. There are numerous and continuing examples of this connection even between mothers and children, between twins, and even between lovers. This is how Mitchell began to note down his sensations, trying to figure out which of them were accurate and which, on the other hand, were imperfect, that is, based on interpretations somewhat filtered by personal experiences and belief systems. Over time, Mitchell reveals that he became better and better at recognizing the accurate ones when they presented themselves. As human beings, Mitchell says we are a very young species, that is, we still have a lot to learn. We are consumed by greed and power, and instead miss the true meaning of things. This is what the great mystics of all religions, albeit in different ways, have tried to make us understand. According to Mitchell, however, if there is one mistake that was made by the pioneers of each religion, it was that they understood God as a well-defined entity, and struggled among themselves for one religion to emerge rather than another. For Mitchell, on the other hand, the universe in which we find ourselves is somehow the body of God, and the consciousness that moves the whole universe, that spirit that moves all things and to which we cannot give a definite scientific answer, is the mind of God. God is not a being, but is all that is present in the universe we inhabit. And this should apply equally to everyone. Then there would be no room for violence and greed in the world. The problem is that those who have not had these transcendental and transformational experiences continue to operate while ignoring the message of unity and the greater good. That is why Mitchell decided to drastically change the course of his life and dedicated all the years to follow precisely to helping global civilization move toward a sustainable future. Transcendental experiences of transforming consciousness must be practiced and taught. In addition to physically sustainable actions, one must also possess a mindset that allows one to understand that we really do have a problem. Most of us believe that the laws of physics are the same throughout the universe. There is no guarantee that there is a star or planet we could move to that would allow us to continue living as we are. It is important to realize that, just like our planet, our solar system has a limited lifespan. If we hurry, there is still time to change and create a better, sustainable future for everybody. The last interview. There is a Jim Clash interview series called The Right Stuff, in which the author interviews extraordinary people who have done extraordinary things. Boxers, pilots, astronauts, divers, scientists, Olympic athletes, mountaineers, men and women who continuously risked their lives not to get rich or become famous, but for one's country, for science, for a better future, for the discovery of new sensations, for the simple joy of competing. Jim Clash himself is a seasoned adventurer. He has skied to the South Pole, driven a Bugatti Veyron to its top speed of 253 miles per hour, flown a MiG-25 to the edge of space, visited the North Pole twice, climbed the Matterhorn, the 23,000-foot Aconcagua, and explored peaks in Antarctica and Greenland. He also bought a ticket from Virgin Galactic Airways to fly into suborbital space. In an interview published on March 6, 2014, Edgar Mitchell answers questions from Jim Clash. He was not the first moonwalker to be interviewed by Clash, but he was certainly the only one who, after being on the moon, openly declared his positions regarding UFOs and extraterrestrials, as we have heard so far. At the time of the interview, Mitchell was already 83 years old. He had been inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame and had recently published his own compelling book, The Way of the Explorer, in which he analyzes his personal journey through mysticism and outer space. The conversation is very interesting, especially in the final part, in which Mitchell makes a shocking and unexpected revelation precisely about his thoughts on UFOs and extraterrestrials. The interview opens with Clash asking Mitchell if he believes it is necessary to establish a base on the moon from which to then leave to reach Mars, as some Apollo moonwalkers, like Charlie Duke, believe. Mitchell replies that he doesn't think it's worth trying to use the moon as a base to go to Mars, as that would mean entering a gravitational belt and then having to come out again, and that would be very challenging. Furthermore, according to Mitchell, the moon doesn't have much to offer in terms of resources needed to become a base from which to leave for Mars. Mitchell believes there are better ways to do it. He even wrote a PhD thesis in the 1960s, in which he analysed the types of propulsion needed to reach the Red Planet. Clash then asks if Mitchell experienced any kind of emotion when he set foot on the moon on February 5, 1971, or if he only considered it as part of the long list of things the Apollo 14 crew had to do during the mission. Mitchell replies by saying that it was sort of a mix of both. Naturally, the emotion and wonder of walking on a surface other than the Earth's, in particular that of the moon, which, from the Earth, seems so small and distant, is indescribable. However, Mitchell continues, it was just part of a list of goals we had researched and rehearsed week after week at Cape Kennedy, in which we went through the entire mission routine, tweaking it, rewriting it, and then retweaking it again until we believed it was perfect and in order. In particular, Apollo 14's mission was to bring a science crew to the moon for the first time, studying its terrain and other aspects, and so Mitchell and his colleagues had to be very careful to get everything done in the time established. Apollo 11 and Apollo 12, on the other hand, only served to physically demonstrate that the United States could take astronauts to the lunar surface and then return them home safely. Then, Clash and Mitchell joke about the moment in which, having finished all their set objectives and before returning on board, Mitchell and his travel companion Alan Shepard played the first Lunar Olympics, as he defined them for fun, where the two threw a javelin and a golf ball into space, where the winner was whoever managed to throw the object the longest distance. For the record, Mitchell grins and says that he won by just 4 inches, and has a photo to prove it. Immediately after this moment of levity, Clash asks the astronaut if he really had some kind of spiritual moment inside the command module during the journey back to Earth, as Mitchell himself confessed, and if he could explain what exactly he meant. Mitchell, maintaining his proverbial composure, answers the question. He says that all he had to do on his return trip was to monitor the spacecraft's systems, which were working perfectly. Then, having established this, he could lie down in zero gravity and watch the slow progress of the flight. Suddenly, he says he felt like he was tuned into something much bigger than himself, bigger than the planet he could see out of the window, something incomprehensibly big. To this day, that perception puzzles me, Mitchell confessed. It wasn't religious or otherworldly, nor was it some new scientific understanding that he had suddenly become aware of. It was, he explains, like a sort of emotional compass that pointed the direction towards a greater understanding of things. It was as if he realized in that instant that he was part of a greater natural process than he had previously and up until then understood, and it was a sensation he only experienced as he and his companions hurtled towards Earth across 240,000 miles of empty, black space. Clash also asks about the extrasensory perception experiments performed by Mitchell during the flight. Mitchell replies by first confirming the experiments and then defining their surprising results. Results which, of course, unfortunately, can only be understood by an expert professional and not by a common man, so much so that the press immediately took the opportunity to publish articles with misleading titles, such as "Astronaut carries out paranormal experiment during a flight to the moon." However, as Mitchell says, while false rumors spread that the experiment proved meaningless, in reality the results were completely in line with experiments conducted before and since in laboratories around the world, so it seems that even great distances, hundreds of thousands of kilometers, do not alter this mysterious paranormal communication. When Mitchell then compares his 4 sets of data, 2 obtained on the outward journey and 2 on the return journey from the moon, with the 6 sets of data obtained from individuals who participated in the experiment on Earth, it was possible to note that there was only a 1 in 3,000 chance that the results obtained were random. Later, Clash asks about Mitchell's position regarding the UFO phenomenon, starting from the famous incident that occurred in his birthplace, Roswell, in 1947, in which Mitchell was involved. The astronaut responds by saying that after his trip to the moon, he was contacted by some descendants of the original Roswell witnesses, including the person who delivered the child-sized coffins to the Air Force containing the alien bodies. Another who contacted Mitchell was one of the sons of the deputy who was patrolling traffic around the site at the time. Still another was a military officer, a friend of his family, not directly involved in that particular operation, but who shared offices with those who had instead been sent into the field shortly after the incident. Mitchell says that they all seemed very credible in saying that the bodies found were actually aliens, or otherwise not of the human race. He goes on to say that he thinks this whole story was covered up because the executives, military and politicians thought people weren't ready to handle the truth. In confirmation of this, he cites the words of President Eisenhower during his last speech, in which he told American citizens to beware of the military-industrial complex. Indeed, Mitchell continues, this is not a cover-up operation carried out only by the army. It is a cabal of money and military organizations that has profit as its main purpose. Airplanes were invented in the early 20th century, and just 20 years ago there was already a thriving airline industry. Just think, says Mitchell, what an industry that contacts and acquires advanced alien technology could achieve, and how much profit it could make by exploiting that technology in terms not only of space travel, but also of new military equipment. Clash then asks whether it is a worldwide cabal, or rather separate efforts within countries such as the United States, Russia and China. Mitchell replies that he believes, though he has no evidence to prove this, it is a worldwide cabal, a common way of acting by all large countries, precisely to prevent the truth about UFOs and extraterrestrials from being revealed to the ordinary citizens of each nation. Finally, Clash concludes with a series of very short and direct questions, to which Mitchell answers in an equally short and direct way. Clash asks Mitchell if he has ever personally seen a UFO. Mitchell replies that, although he considers himself very knowledgeable about the subject, he admits that he has never personally seen one, and that he doesn't go around looking for them, but that if he ever sees a UFO, he would be glad to do so. Regarding the famous Nevada sightings over Area 51, Mitchell believes that some of these, as Clash himself speculates, can be attributed to a new military aircraft that America was developing, capable of accelerating to over Mach 2 in less than a second and able to turn on itself. However, Mitchell does not believe that aircraft of such range and such advanced technology could really have been developed by the technology hitherto in the hands of the military, and that in any case, the shape and the characteristics of the UFOs sighted were not even remotely similar to those of US military aircraft. When asked if he's ever been threatened by anyone for his outspokenness about UFOs, Mitchell replies no, and that if they ever did or tried to do so, they wouldn't have much success with a guy like him. Finally, Clash asks if Mitchell is disappointed that man last visited the moon in 1972. Mitchell admits that he is a little disappointed by this, and that he thinks that space development should continue and move forward. Governments should organize themselves to work together on this issue, because it is really too much work for one country. Humanity needs a community of nations capable of spaceflight, because sooner or later we will all have to leave this planet. Our sun will extinguish sooner or later, and we are not in a sustainable situation. These issues need to be addressed, and space development is a great solution for a sustainable future. Mitchell concludes the interview by advising anyone wishing to learn more about the subject for study, need, or even just out of curiosity, to read books and articles, listen to interviews, and visit the sites and blogs of those who, like him, work and have worked on this theme. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man on the moon, died 2 years after this interview, in 2016, at the age of 85.